like to call to order the September 14th, 2021 meeting of the Johnson City Regional Planning Commission. Thank you for everybody attending, especially the commissioners and the public. I'd like to ask our Commissioner Oschenbein to lead us in an invocation and a pledge of allegiance.
Let us pray. Dear Heavenly Father, we come to you today as a commission with the mindset on improving our community. I hope that you can guide our decisions and our votes so that one day we can look back and know that we have made a difference for all those whom come before this council. I would like to have you embrace our healthcare providers right now within the ballot system and our outpatient services. We are battling a virus that I know you are aware of. I want you to comfort the families of those who have lost loved ones and strengthen those as we come together as a city once again after this virus. We know that you are with us, and we are going to continue to praise you and work to meet your Lord's goals in our lives. In your name we pray, amen.
Amen.
You can join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I want to thank the public for considering public safety and distancing socially, and also for wearing your mask. But I would offer to the commissioners, since we're socially distanced and petitioned apart from each other, if you feel comfortable, you can take your mask off during the meeting. Okay. Let's do a show of hands so we can consider the order of the agenda. How many people are here about the South Austin Springs item? 2, 3, 4. What about South Commerce Street? South Roan Street? Knob Creek? And, okay, that's good. We'll leave the agenda in the current order then. Do I hear a motion to approve the agenda as presented?
So moved.
Second.
Nicole, do we need to vote on that?
No, just
Okay.
aye.
Aye. Everybody in favor say aye, please.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, I think we've seen, we've been presented the minutes of the August 10th meeting. Does anyone have any comments or corrections to those minutes that they've been submitted? Do I hear a motion they be approved?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor of approving the minutes as submitted, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
And I abstain. I was not at the meeting.
Okay, thank you, Jenny. Did you get that, Nicole?
I did.
Thank you. All right, let's move directly into our agenda. Ms. Hodges, I think your staff's going to present the question of the South Austin Springs at Cobb Creek rezoning question.
The rezoning request before you is to go from a medium density residential of R3 to RP3, which is a planned unit residential. From when these maps were created to what is shown, the plan has gone through many iterations. So the rezoning line is actually, it's a little jagged, but it would be this section here, not this back section. That's going to stay as R3 on both of these. And I just wanted to make that so that your plan matches up with what the maps would show. And the concept plan, which was included with your packet, is here. They're proposing to have 77 single-family homes with a 50-foot right-of-way, 2 entrances along South Austin Springs Road. They're meeting open space requirements. They're putting their stormwater features up towards Cobb Creek, which is the low-lying area, and as well as putting some open space around those. The open space would be here and here and then through here. we do have one compatibility issue that I want to address. But first, just to kind of, one of the things with the RP3, there is some intent behind the RP3 of what, when you use this district, it's meant to basically be able to develop around environmental concerns or different things. So almost like to provide some types of cluster development. And so one of the things that staff has noted is that there are, in this area, 2 houses that are single-family houses. This is some multifamily that are here. And I'm going to go back to some. But that this would be the one issue that staff would have as far as like maybe preserving some trees or providing some buffer. But you'll also know that the multifamily that is here, there's a street stub, and that is Arrowhead Drive. When they come back for a subdivision plat, they'll need to also ask for a control strip crossing there. And I think that's really our main issue. They are, oh, sorry, let me go back to say that what they're going to be doing with their sidewalk is you'll notice here is that they are providing sidewalk, oh, didn't mean to do that, south on Austin Springs Road instead of north, so that they are not doing any further damage into the creek or anything. So they're going to kind of connect to a sidewalk that's already existing, which we're in support of. Oh, but to go back to what the possible buffers are, would be to preserve some trees. As you noted in this picture, there's a tree line here, either to preserve these trees or to provide some other type of buffering, as well as maybe along the fences, along the back property line, maybe to add some fencing or buffering to that section. It's not required because a buffer isn't required between those 2 zoning districts.
Oh, really?
I know, it's because it's R3. It's an R3 single-family house, so, because that is allowed. But maybe just to provide a little bit extra. And that is actually something staff is asking for, because like I said, it's not a required buffer. One might wonder, and this was also in your staff report, what would be a reason, because it is zoned a medium-density residential, and they're actually asking for less density, why they would want to change their zoning instead of just rezoning as developing as is. And a lot of that has to do with lot size and lot width. They can do 4,000 square foot lots in a planned unit development, like I said, clustering those lots so that they can protect, protect different areas, as well as 40-foot wide lots. So, and then their setbacks are very similar, maybe some 5 feet on the back, and they are providing for the drainage easements. And then they are providing open space, which would not be required in the R3. So, what else do I have there? In the land use plan, this site is kind of already, it's basically said that it would be residential, and this is consistent with that. There was a neighborhood meeting. I will let Peyton or Preston, if you have questions about the neighborhood meeting, speak to that. I could not attend. But staff does recommend approval with the condition that the compatibility be noted on the site plan, and that this rezoning request would be consistent with the bridge plan of providing different types of housing.
Thank you,
And I
Ms.
will leave
Hodges.
this on a vicinity map.
Thank you. Let's ask questions.
So if in terms of your request to hold on to the trees for buffering, does that have to be included in the motion?
If they agree to it, then you would need to ask them if they would agree to that.
The builder?
Yes,
Okay.
the applicant, that would be Mr. Phillips.
Okay, so, and then as a PUD development, are the streets up to, is it gonna be a PUD or not?
No, it would be for sale lots.
Okay.
So, and the streets, the 50-foot right-of-way width,
Right.
that would allow for 24 feet of pavement.
Okay.
And they also are providing, a new fire requirement is that there be 26 feet around hydrants, and so they're also gonna provide for that.
All right, thank you.
A couple questions. I normally get out and drive by and see these before Planning Commission, but I didn't get a chance this week. This is fairly close up on Austin Springs where it cuts off Oakland, is that correct?
Yes.
You just go around the corner and it'd be
This is
right
the
there on
end
the
of
right.
Princeton. So like, you know how Princeton Road comes around and kind of, this is where Princeton Road ends. I don't have it up on the GIS, but I can't imagine it is more than a mile, half a mile? Yes. Okay. Okay.
On the right, okay. Is it fairly hilly in that area? I mean, on the backside of the lot, does it,
On the back,
goes
this
up on the
right
back?
here climbs drastically.
yeah,
So the back side of the lot does climb drastically. Towards the street, it's low lying. Towards the road, it's low lying.
yeah, I'm familiar, yeah.
Yeah, so there's a big ridge kind of like to the back. I call it a big ridge. but-
Right. Are all, my last question, are all the properties that surround this piece of property, they're all in the city, or is there any county properties there?
The county property is here. So on the back side of the ridge, that's county property. The rest of it is in the city.
Okay. And so these will be single-family homes?
They will.
and This is Mr. Phillips, right?
Yes.
If I could just ask a question, is this similar to his what is Alta Vista out off of
You'll have to ask him.
West Walnut?
Yeah.
If it's a similar development like that?
He's in the audience. His
Okay. I'll ask him
representations,
when it
yeah.
comes up.
Mhm.
Is there any mitigation needed for rainwater runoff from the high property in the back that's not being rezoned onto this property?
Because they're not disturbing it, they only have to mitigate what they disturb. So they have to take into account water flow of how it's coming onto the property. Lawrence may want to speak a little bit better to that, but that is how I understand engineering, is they have to take into account what's coming in, and they can't increase the rate at which it goes off their property.
Okay.
So that's when roads, roofs, those things increase velocity, and that's what kind of does a lot of degradation to
Go back
streams.
to the sketch of the
Yes.
layout.
No, I
please.
went through that really quick.
Okay,
But you can see, like, that's some steep topo right there.
okay, and they're stubbing off the dead
They
end.
are. I think that'll want more attention in the subdivision. At the moment, it's okay.
Thank you. Other questions?
Do we have good line of sight? I know that kind of goes around a curve there, and does it straighten out enough that the line of sight of getting out on Austin Springs is adequate?
Let me look at you. Yeah, it's been approved by engineering, so yes.
So no decel, is that a decel lane? I'm sorry.
What they're showing right now is, we're gonna ask for a better decel lane, a 75-foot storage, 75-foot taper.
All right, thanks, sir.
Any other questions for staff?
What kind of green, I can't really tell just from looking at that, and maybe I should look closer. What kind of green space is proposed?
They haven't said how or if they're going to improve it, but it is accessed by one of the things that staff is very concerned about most of the time is that the public can access it. So you'll notice that there is a public road here, and then along here, and that this is contiguous. So that's really important to us.
Is the green space to be utilized up there at the front on the road frontage or in the back?
The green space.
Well,
This-
the open space, I'm sorry. Or is it just
This
a
is
kind
a
of an
creek.
accumulation of all those things?
It would be anything that's outside of stormwater, like this would be anything that's outside of stormwater areas.
So 15% of the entire development has to be that, is that
It has to be, 15% of the entire development has to be is open space.
open space?
And it
Okay.
cannot include the stormwater features.
But it does not have any kind of set particular uses?
No, like they haven't said pocket park or natural or anything. They've just, that's where the gray area comes in.
But they own the property behind, right, the hillside?
They do.
That's great green space.
That is not part of the rezoning. They may
Okay.
develop it later
Okay.
as R3.
Realizing the discussion that we've had in the last couple of weeks about drives and emergency vehicles and our sanitation, the width of the roads and parking, does this meet the requirement?
It meets what's in the subdivision ordinance. They do have the 24 40-foot wide streets. We're still trying to assess some of that. So the 40-foot wide lots, I think that some attention will need to, in the subdivision process, some attention will need to be paid to where those driveways are to assure that there is room for on-street parking. Intermittent on-street parking.
Okay, I'm going to open the floor for public comment. Is anybody here to speak to this issue? If you'd come forward and give us your name and address, and you're welcome to give us your thoughts.
My name is Jacqueline Rush, and I own the property at 210, 212, and my aunt lives at 214. We've lived there since 1925 is when my grandmother bought the property. My concern is, the city, and I couldn't find my paper because my dad passed away in 2004. But the guy that owns the condos behind us bought an easement through our property to put in some drainage pipes. That was never done. That went through the city building here, and it was never done through our property. They paid $1,000 to put it through our property, but nobody ever done it. We get loads of water from them. And I'm just here to make sure that I'm not going to get more water from this thing here that they're building over there, because my aunt's house has been flooded many times from the water that we get in the back. And that's a concern of ours. The other concern is my aunt lives right there on the property. I mean, she's right next to the field. We were told that they wouldn't put up a fence or anything. My aunt is almost 90 years old, and I think they should put a fence up there so everybody's not running over to her property all the time. Because, she's very concerned about this. She couldn't be here, but she's very concerned about it. I have no problem with them building. I just want to make sure I'm not going to get any more water in my property from that.
Could you
If you
help
go
me?
back to that one picture, you see a little blue house on there. That is my aunt's house, and she lives right next to it. They took the fence row and stuff out when they were clearing the lot, so there's no fence there. So when he builds the houses, she would like a fence there or something that people are not always in her yard. She's older, and she's very concerned that somebody's going to break in on her or something. My other concern is right there on Austin Springs Road at our driveway, we've had many people killed there. Many people in car wrecks killed there because they fly down through there. I mean, we've asked the police department to come out and set up radar and stuff, and sometimes they'll come out and catch a couple cars and then they're gone. That's another concern. The road taking on more traffic is a concern that, that they're going to be flying down through there more people, and we can't hardly get out of our driveway now because of the people. It's just concerns that we have. The biggest concern is our water, because when it rains hard, we get lots of water from the condos they built right in our back door. So it's just a concern for us. I have no problem with Mr. Phillips' building. I just don't want more water coming, so I want to make sure that problem is taken care of.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you.
Because the city didn't take care of the other one when they were supposed to, so.
Can you stay up there for just a second, please? Preston, can you go to the aerial view, please?
I'll let Whitney.
Or Whitney? Thank you, Whitney.
Which aerial? Stop me when you see it.
That's my aunt's house right there, 214 South Austin Springs Road. That's my aunt's house, and my houses are right beside of hers. I own 210 and 212.
Oh, sorry, I'm pointing, but y'all can't see it.
Sorry.
There it is.
So these are the two houses you own?
Yes, and there's condos right in her back door.
Right.
So
And
those properties will be higher than your property? Is that correct?
The ones that they're gonna build?
Yes.
It's over to the side of ours, but we get so much water from the ones they've already built where they put in, there's a pavement road that comes down through there. So when it rains, all that water runs down from the.
So you're
bottom
downhill
side.
from, you're downhill from the
She's
development?
downhill from this.
Yes.
Okay.
And so that's where I was suggesting a fence, is
Yeah.
where it's your aunt's property.
Yeah.
Okay. just want-
Because she's really concerned because she's older, so. Or he's welcome to come and just buy them and we'll move.
There you go.
So,
Okay, thank
so
you.
that's our concern.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Any other comments from anyone else? Yes, sir.
Thank you.
No.
My name is Jackie. Elizabeth Feathers is my aunt, my sister-in-law. She lives in our house at 212. But they're in my name, mine and my mom and dad's names.
Other comments?
She's probably calling for my aunt.
Okay, and here, seeing that no one else has a comment, I'm going to close the public meeting.
Mr. Phillips, go ahead.
I'd like to,
Come up and say anything.
Chris, I'd like to ask the owner I'd like to ask the developer a couple of questions.
For the record, I'm Gary Phillips. I am the developer and the owner, and I reside at 235 Allison Cove Trail, Piney Flats, Tennessee 37686.
Thank you.
And I'll open for questions.
Gary, I have one, and you've got your code consultant with you, I noticed. And I've researched this thing, over the years, we've had houses closer and closer together, and we used to have fire separation distances. The new codes indicate a more lenient on R3 type construction. However, I'm concerned about your opening protectives on the sides. These are very long houses that you've got planned. And the UBC calls for 15 to 25% opening maximum. What is your plan, or can your consultant amplify that in terms of how you're going to get openings on the sides of those without violating the code?
Well, I think Whitney earlier said we went through several revisions, which we have. And first of all, I will say that I do have Matt Bundy here, which is my engineer and architect, but not the architect for the housing. This development is for D.R. Horton, and it's designed for their first, well, I'm going to say their first and second level homes, which is first 1 story, 1.5 story, and 2 story. Most of these building pads that you see are not for their 2-story homes. It's what they ask for, and they have the flexibility to build whatever they would like, and the market drives that, okay? So I do have Jim Sullivan here as well, that's a consultant with me, just to let you guys know that they may be able to answer questions later. But to answer your question, we started out to meet code. Code in RP3 is 5 feet. We went from 84 lots to 77. So we've already revised and made it an additional 5 feet. You do have the 2x3 fire windows. If you want to get into the details, and you and I both know this, you can buy a fire door, especially, or a fire window, especially on the side in the bathrooms. I think most of their homes, I can't speak for them, they do not have windows on the sides. They have is that not true, ma'am?
No, I'm saying, I agree with you. I mean, they're building some out off of Greenwood at Willard.
That's correct.
Or is it be the same similar type?
It is, but it's actually a
Yeah.
notch above.
Yeah, and they don't.
It's-
I was out
That's
there not long
correct.
ago.
It's
They
in
don't
the
have windows
design
on
of the
sides.
home. Now, we did go, the most important thing, we went from 5 to 7.5 feet, which gives you 15 feet. Your all's code is 5 feet, not 7.5.
On R3?
RP3.
Yeah.
In this building.
Did I answer
section
your
where-
question?
Yeah.
Is that correct, Mr. Mitchell?
We'll be glad to address after the.
Any other questions? I could respond to Ms. Ross. I have been speaking to, I've actually talked to most of the neighbors in most of the associations around there. Neighbors are associations. I spoke to the gentleman to the right. He's happy with what we're doing. He's A1. And I spoke with Miss Mary Hodges, which is, I think, her grandmother. I spoke with Elizabeth, not this lady, and she asked me to, Elmer and the Feathers boys, I'm not quite sure. They all know me. I know them because I think Elmer worked in the city. They actually called me and asked me to clear the fence row, and I did. I done what I was told to do. They were happy, okay? Even though it is, I think, R1, we are asking for zoning. And I'm not quite sure of the water flow, and I'm going to be very specific, the stormwater flow. If you do drive up South Austin Springs, there is some big white pipes that comes out of that ditchway, and I'm not quite sure where they go. It's not on the plat that's recorded. unlike McMaster's Knob, which I met with them on Sunday. They are very happy. They do have documentation. That's a condo in this area right here. I met with them on Sunday, and they do have a plat that's recorded that shows that they're supposed to do certain things, and they've actually done more than they should, and we're going to clean that up. What I mean by that, they've got their water going onto my property currently, and I'll fix it for them free of charge. Any other questions?
So would you be amicable to leave some trees for a buffer and perhaps put a fence up along that property line?
Which property line, sir?
412?
Side of my aunt there.
What,
There is no trees there. I would be all in favor of doing a buffer 1 there if that would make you
Type
guys
1.
happy as well. Sir, I'd do a 10 and 10, sure. I'd put Leland's up through there. That's the right thing to do. It would, because here's why it's the right thing to do. Because, did you fill in with the slides? Did you put the slide up that actually, I'm sorry. The slide up, there you go. Thank you, sir. Oh, ma'am. Yep. Exactly. And you had a great picture of that.
Could you please stay at the mic so we can keep you, and you can use the pointer?
I can point. Oh, do you have
The
a
mouse.
Oh, great, I can do that. Outstanding. I have no issue of putting a buffer 1 here because that's probably the right thing to do. Actually, I've already told, we're not in the design phase, Jamie, but my engineer already knows through our stormwater studies that we've done during rains that we will put a swell down through here
okay.
to take care of what waters may be there. But there is, and she is right, this lady is right, but there's some white pipes if you drive up this road, because we were looking at the sidewalk. You can't put sidewalks with pipe sticks, if you know what I mean, especially in the wintertime. There's some pipes that come through here. I'm not quite sure where they come from. And I didn't walk on the property of this condo development, which is zoned R5. So there's a little bit more research that needs to be done there. There's some drainage there, and she's correct. But the drainage is not from the back of her house. I think the drainage is from this area right here, because it's a small ditch.
We flood down there at the thing, but the guy next to us, David, he has pipes running down into the ditch.
David
That's
Bulla.
the one you see.
Yep, David has
David Bulla.
large, David Bulla's home does have large white pipes sticking out. Where they come from, I have no idea.
Thank you, thank you.
We talked about a buffer in this area. It's not shown on the concept plan, not required, but we do plan to keep all of this area here natural, all of this area. We have cleaned some of the stuff out. We plan to clean this creek out to keep it from flooding from the debris that actually stops the bridges up. We do plan to put a greenway, a walkway through this area right here, as you see what I'm doing. And we left the good quality trees in this area right here. That's the picture that Whitney Hodges showed you earlier. I plan to put trees in this area right here. I plan to put Lelands in clusters of 3 to kind of make it look nice.
Great.
Our goal is to make this look like park setting, all of this area here, including that area right there and that area right there.
Thank you very much.
Any other questions?
So will there be an HOA to maintain that raw land as well, or is this?
It's not a wetland per se, but we will have an HOA that's defined by D.R. Horton.
Okay.
And they will write their own covenant that controls these areas, as they should, including this area and including that area. I will talk with you, Ms. Brock, for a few minutes. This is 10% slope. That meets subdivision regs of the city of Johnson City. My last time that I rezoned this years back, I planned to put townhouses in there. And it's on the concept plan and it was approved. At this time, we took them off because it was a recommendation because of the bridge plan. I do plan to do some grading back in here because I need the soils in this area right here to level this area and get it on grade. Okay? I deer hunt. I actually hunt back there. I have for years.
Well, there's no doubt we have a housing shortage in
Yep.
We
Johnson
do.
City and
Especially for this
just our
market.
housing stock in different,
Right. I will plan to clean it up to where there's no issues in the future. I will plan to put a 50-foot stub, and I do plan to pave all the way back to there. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you for being
Thank you
so
for your
helpful.
time. Sure. Thank you, sir.
Any other comments or questions from the public? Could you come to the microphone, please?
I just want him to know also that he needs to, I'm not sure, but when we have car wrecks there, okay, they do run through that field there. So he needs to take that in consideration. There's a lot of cars that run through his field over there. And so you might want to take that in consideration too.
Thank you. If there's no other public comment, if you have comment, raise your hand. If not, I'm going to close the public meeting and offer for the discussion amongst us, the commission. Any questions amongst each other? For staff to follow up?
Chris, I have just one question, please.
Yes.
Whitney,
I was going to clear up one thing about side setbacks. So in the RP3, there are no side setbacks that are required, but there is a 7.5 drainage easement that is required. So that's why it is an interesting question to answer. So
Is that 7.5 on each side of the lot line or just one lot line in
that is-
between?
That is actually on all lot lines,
So on both sides between units?
front and back.
Okay,
as
thank
well.
so all four sides.
All four sides.
So with the
It's
request
15.
from staff, will the type 1 buffer meet your request?
I think that could, he said that he would save the trees and perhaps just adding language of just, making sure that protection through the drip line, so that gets noted through the, so that there's fencing around the drip line, so they're not disturbed, maybe that, so that that can get noted in the subdivision plat. Because again, you will see this project again if it is approved, because it will need to come for subdivision plat. And I do want to say if, since we're not all the way there yet. So, but that's something you could note. And then, because he, as I understood it, he was also wanting to plant lelands in 3s around this area. That's what I heard. So,
This is not a I think what you're trying to say, just so I am correct, or my thinking is correct, this is not a preliminary plan that is coming for approval of a subdivision. This is just a concept plan to determine whether or not we approve of the rezoning, which really the only differences there are what you showed us in that chart. Is that correct?
correct. They're asking for kind of a planned unit development that
Has a new density, some different setbacks.
but what they are doing is tying the rezoning to this concept plan.
Okay, so
So if the plan goes away, the zoning goes away, is that correct?
No,
Zoning stays the same.
zoning would stay the same.
The zoning would stay the same. The plan can't ever go away. The plan and the zoning are always married. It's that if this development never happens, then someone would come forward and need to ask for a concept plan amendment.
For instance, Claude Simmons Road, that development didn't happen. Something else happened. They had to come back for a concept plan amendment.
But the zoning still changed.
That one actually asked for a zoning change, but they didn't.
Gotcha. All right, very good, thank you.
Any other discussion or questions? Does anyone want to make a motion?
I make a motion to approve.
You want to state the motion?
can you talk into the microphone? It's hard to.
Yeah. I make a motion to approve the rezoning and the concept plan as presented.
Second the motion.
Can we amend can I make an amendment to your motion, Ubi? I'd also like to add a type 1 buffer And the type 1 buffer, what, is it on what side of, around the whole property?
No, it's around, around portions of,
In the green space?
in the green space.
Leland, a type 1 buffer in the green space as well as along the property line of
Adjoining 240 South Austin Springs Road.
240 South Austin Springs Road.
The type 1 buffer I think that you're looking for is the one back here.
Right,
Okay.
yes.
The house.
And that's against 214 South Austin Springs Road.
Are you agreeable to that
Yes.
amendment?
That's fine.
Against 214 South Austin Springs Road. Is that okay, Ubi?
That's fine.
Thank you.
Okay, discussion about the motion?
Chris, does that mean that
Second on
we
the
would be
amendment.
following what the recommendation is approving the rezoning of the property to RP3 with justification? Is that what this means?
Yes.
Okay.
Did I hear a second?
Second motion.
Yes, Sean seconded.
May I repeat the motion to be
Yes,
clear?
please,
Okay.
Nicole.
So the motion is to, with the condition of a type 1 buffer, is that green space or open space?
Green space.
Okay,
There are 2 buffers.
right.
So at the green space to protect the trees, right?
Yes,
Right.
ma'am.
Okay.
And at 214
At
South Austin.
to add a type 1 buffer.
Okay, so type 1 buffer in the green space and along 214 South Austin Springs Road. Is that correct?
Along the property line of property
Yeah.
214 South Austin Springs,
Okay.
the rear property line. Rear.
Is there the north property
adjacent,
line?
The shared property line.
Yes.
Okay.
That's a
Had
nice
it.
compromise.
Thank
from
you.
the- From
Okay.
both parties.
And I think the second was on the original motion, so it needs to be second the amended motion.
Okay, did I hear a second to
I
the
second the
amendment?
amended motion.
Thank you.
Sounds like
Okay.
that's
All right, any other discussion? Rowena, did you get your answer?
Yes, I did, thank you.
Thank you. Nicole, would you call the roll?
Yes, sir. Commissioner Bailey,
Yes.
Commissioner Brock,
Yes.
Commissioner Mays,
Yes.
Commissioner Oshinbain,
Yes.
Commissioner Pavlich,
Yes.
Commissioner Rhodey,
Yes.
and Chairman Dagenhart.
Yes,
Motion approved with stated conditions.
thank you. All right, Ms. Hodges, we have another topic on South Commerce Street. Could you present, please?
This property is currently zoned I-2. I don't like using. There we go. It is currently, it's two parcels zoned I-2. I'm going to say interesting, I'm going to use that word, it's probably not the right word, but there's a lot of right-of-way between the property and South Commerce Street. So there is a B3 portion here, oh, went back too far. I don't like the mouse. And it's the city policy that where there is right-of-way, that all of that is rezoned. So this looks like a very large rezoning, and it in some ways is, but really, the development would occur on these 2 portions. And that is a small-scale coffee shop and bakery. This is a new plan than from what's in your packet, and I'll explain the differences. The drive would use the existing drive that comes off Lamont Street. And I'll show you kind of a picture of where that is. And they're providing some side yard parking. What this is a bakery and coffee shop, like I said, in 2,000 square feet. The coffee shop would be here. Let's just go with that. It would be here. It's about 300 square feet. The bakery and kitchen, so there'll be some retail space and a kitchen, is about 1,700 square feet. They have sidewalks that will run to their building, to the existing parking that's at Founders Square and Founders Park, something else, sorry. And then a sidewalk that will run along their driveway. So connecting as much as they can to the neighborhood and to the park that's across the street. oh, let me go back. Because some of the things, so around their parking, they have a buffer here, they're buffering their dumpster and around this residential area, this residentially zoned area. Let's see, anything else? And they will comply with stormwater. That's something that needs to be noted. So this one, parking has been something that Mr. Ramsey and I have not gone to fisticuffs on, but come close. So, because it's a very, how parking in a mixed-use area kind of looks a little bit different. So this coffee shop area is 300 square feet, so that would need 3 spaces. But the bakery, we don't actually have a parking requirement for bakery. So as staff, we looked around to different cities, and when we don't have a use, the planning director can kind of use their knowledge and say what would be something that is appropriate. So we've looked at that, and it seems as though between 4 and 6 spaces for what they're using for a bakery would be appropriate. Now, if going with a mixed-use zoning, that means that they could use their parking inside of a city lot, and they would just need to say these are the spaces that we would use. But what they are doing with this is they're providing 7 spaces on site, and they would need, I'm going to say, somewhere between 7 and 9 spaces. I know it's not as concrete as I would like, but let's go with it. And so those 7 of those will be on site. So the parking for Founders, that parking lot across the street, in theory, would not be as impacted. This is just kind of an aesthetic that they provided. They provided it some time back of just what they were thinking about. It's also part of the MX zoning that it be compatible with the neighborhood. So this was just something to kind of consider. This is the driveway I was talking about that's coming down. Like, they'll make improvements, but that's the location of it. And then just to kind of show you where all of this is. And like here because notice how the site slopes a little bit. It's got a kind of a cross slope to it. Now, I do want you to kind of know, if it doesn't get rezoned, like what could happen in I-2, because the property can be developed as is. This is a list of things that I believe could possibly happen. I'm not going to say that they all would, but I could see someone coming in and asking, like the fabrication and compounding. I'm really thinking like artist studio, not necessarily like a large manufacturing. It's not a very big lot. But the ones that are in red, those would be considered neighborhood compatible, that are already in I-2. But the others are maybe not be as compatible, and these could go in at any time. Like, it's already zoned for this. The current land use has this site as, I believe, just a vacant parcel, and that would be government or institutional. And I believe it's been sold since this. And you'll notice that the future has Founders as still as business. And so as that has changed over to a community asset, this kind of land use map makes some changes that we just haven't gotten to, and so that would be impacted. Just to kind of give you a vicinity map of where this is located, we have Founders here. This is where the I-2 has historically been, and then there is an MX parcel that I believe was city initiated in 2019 on the corner of Whitney. So let's see. There was a neighborhood meeting that was held, and again, I will look to Peyton and Preston, because I do believe that there were that there were neighbors there. I know that there were neighbors there, and then but staff does recommend approval. It does meet part of the bridge plan in providing these small scale, commercial uses within and adjacent to a neighborhood. So.
Questions for staff? Where is the front door and the entrance going to be?
That, from what I understand, and Mr. Manzi, I don't like that. Mr. Manzi is here. That the front, from what this note says, is that the front is here. So it would face Commerce. It can face Commerce.
So you
It's to be
consider that
seen.
facing Commerce?
To be seen, how it's written is it needs to be seen. So yes, I would
Okay.
consider it.
Okay.
I've also believed that there, because parking is here, that there, I don't know, Mr. Manzi, but I feel like there will be a secondary entrance somewhere over on this side too. Not that people can't walk around a building.
You know, I don't necessarily have a question for staff, but I do have a statement. I think it would be important as we look at infill and in particular MX1, when it comes to parking, and I think the parking requirements for these types of businesses, I would almost like to see this go to a committee on looking at policy on parking requirements and in this particular zoning, MX1. Because I think in the spirit of MX1, it's supposed to be more pedestrian and to fit the neighborhood use and not necessarily people to travel in and out of in these MX1 zones. So I could be off base, but that's just kind of what my thoughts are, and we can take that up later. But as far as this particular property, I don't have any questions for staff.
Okay, I'll open the floor to the public for comment.
Thank you, Whitney.
Could you please come forward and give us your name and address, please?
Thank you. Lorraine Brown, 319 Lamont Street, Johnson City. The concerns that I shared in April with the Planning Commission regarding our neighborhood and rezoning have not been addressed. And I would appreciate you reviewing those documents before you make a decision on this. Tonight, I want to share what has been brought up most frequently by residents of the Mountain Home neighborhood. The biggest problems are parking and cut-through traffic. We have asked for a traffic study before any rezoning is done. Instead of a study, there was action. Highland Avenue now has signs that parking is allowed only on one side of the street, all the way from Founders Park to University Parkway. Without consultation with residents, parking is now more difficult and cut-through traffic is faster and heavier. Many homes in older neighborhoods do not have driveways or have shared driveways. Many homes in our neighborhoods are occupied by students with 5 or 6 cars plus guests. There are homeowners who have requested driveways and been denied permits. There are homes now with 3 or more cars parked on their front lawns. At the City Commission meeting, July 1st, Mr. Preston explained that since our neighborhood was built on a grid system, that the traffic is dispersed. What we have is a broken grid system. The city broke our grid by creating dead ends of many streets and alleys. Streets designed as neighborhood streets, such as Hillcrest and Winter going north-south, and Lamont and Highland going east-west, bear the burden of this lack of planning by the city. We have collected multiple suggestions for improving traffic and parking, but the city wants to continue with development led by investors without a plan. The capacity of Watauga to carry higher traffic is not the primary problem. The problem is streets designed and designated as neighborhood streets being used as arterial roads. Mixed use in this case is not something that will help our neighborhood at this time. It is something that might be allowed after a traffic and parking study. So is it being done for the downtown since it is at the edge of the downtown district? No. There are people who have invested much more money than the $500,000 figure that Mr. Manley gave us in the neighborhood meeting last week. The cost of rehabbing existing buildings is higher than building on an empty lot, and they will be hurt by a new business going up at the outskirts, which will keep people from walking from Founders Park to the downtown. There is already a bakery at Model Mill, Crumb's Bakery downtown on Roan Street, and on Commerce Street in the Atelier Art Gallery, a baker coffee shop which will open soon. All of these bakeries and several coffee shops are in existing downtown buildings. I think the planning department should keep an inventory of empty and partially used commercial buildings. We have a housing need, not a commercial building need in our city. In order for the downtown to be vibrant, the vehicle and pedestrian traffic needs to be directed to the downtown. For the downtown, there should be a goal of occupancy, a goal. For example, 80 or 90% of all ground floor building square footage be occupied, and 75% of other floors occupied before expanding into the surrounding neighborhoods. There are downtown business owners who have told me how hard it is to find property to rent or buy. Yet, they are afraid to sign our petition because they fear being identified as not being a friend of the city. There are residents of our neighborhood who, although they agree, are afraid to sign because their landlord might see it, and it is very hard to find affordable housing. And very disturbing, there are residents who have signed, but who have said that the city has already made up their mind, as evidenced by selling 2 city lots at the end of Founders Park to the lowest bidders, Friends of the City, at a loss of more than $10,000. That some neighborhoods get studies and some neighborhoods get the shaft. That's a quote. Last week, before the agenda for your meeting was posted, I pointed out that we were told it was a 2,000 square foot single-story building with a 1,000 square foot deck. Now, what is online as your agenda is a little bit different than what I'm seeing here. What was online on the agenda was presented as, let's see. So I pointed out that we were told it was a 2,000 square foot single story with a 1,000 square foot deck. And yet the planning department presented it as a 1,000 square foot building. But this mistake wasn't corrected before it was posted. Are they trying to mislead people who look and think 1,000 square feet isn't much because that's what we see online right now? Or is it a clever work around the requirement of one parking per 100 square feet required of restaurants, which would mean 20 spaces, as opposed to 10 plus 2, which was online today, but which now is even less, because online today it's at 1,000 bakery and 1,000 coffee shop. So it's been changed again. I realized that they, along with the property already zoned MX1 on Highland, can both count the Founders parking lot toward their requirements. But the Founders parking lot is already full at times, especially evenings, even when there is no special event downtown. This is a full public parking lot and on-street parking being used in front of neighbors' homes before 202 Highland is developed and before the downtown buildings are fully occupied. Our first home was in the downtown Dilworth neighborhood of Charlotte in North Carolina. This is what I have always hoped our neighborhood would become, and someday commercial at the end of Founders Park will make sense. But so far, due to the lack of planning, Johnson City has hurt our neighborhood and has slowed the redevelopment of the downtown, and it's time for that to stop. Please listen to the citizens who have started a petition requesting a thorough traffic and parking study before any rezoning other than to the R2C promised for our neighborhood in 2005, or R4 at the edges collector streets. Now, I didn't start the online petition, so I couldn't print what was current. This is the signatures from a couple months ago. There are another 2 pages that I'll have to ask the person who set it up to do, as well as these 2 pages that I'd be happy to give you. Any
Welcome-
questions?
You're welcome to leave those with the commission, please.
Yes,
if
I'd
you'd
be
like.
happy to leave those.
And how many names did you say you had on those?
The online, I think, is like at 96.
Could you come back to the microphone, please? I'm sorry. Thank you.
And when I put my mask on when I walk away. Yes, the online, I think, is like at 96, and the paper was at 29, I think.
Thank you.
I'm not the one who set up the petition, so,
Thank you.
and I have, any other questions?
Ms. Brown, when was that petition started?
It was started, like, right before the city commission meeting in July.
July, okay.
Yeah.
And do y'all verify the names on those those petitions, that they're people who actually live in the neighborhood?
Well, some of them, well, for one thing, as far as them living in the neighborhood, some of them live in Johnson City, but don't actually live in the neighborhood, but agree that it's a problem. So they don't all live in the neighborhood. There's some that we realized, like, that we knew the person, and it's like, you don't live in Texas anymore. They've moved here from Texas. So, and a couple who I think are a joke.
Yeah, we noticed that, and
Yeah.
so I would,
But-
before you submit it a second time, I would really make sure that it's.
But I don't know how to do this. You don't know how much trouble I've gotten even, well, anyway, so I'm
So,
not really adept at doing these online things.
so you made a comment that I was not aware of. You stated that something either 2004, 2005.
That we were
What-
promised.
Tell me about that, please.
Okay. The people who the city led, or the neighborhood led down zoning was instigated when we moved here. The neighborhood was mainly older people who were very elderly, a lot of professors and young professionals on Highland. But it was when the tree streets were getting their historical zoning and limiting it. So as the students and fraternities were being pushed out of the tree streets, and our older residents were dying, the homes were being bought up by developers and investors and just being broken up. So we all of a sudden were getting a lot of students. So that was when, I'm trying to think, Mr. McConnell, John Connolly, was that
Jim
his name?
Jim.
Yeah.
Donnelly.
Donnelly.
Yeah,
You've
Jim
got
Donnelly,
it.
yeah.
You've got it.
Okay.
Had us collect signatures about downzoning. So we went around and we actually had 2 different ones for residents and for homeowners, and did a downzoning. Now, as far as everything not being downzoned, in one of my emails to the city commissioners, I explained this better. He said, like, there were, if you look at the map, I don't know if you can bring up a map of our neighborhood. There are sections like along Lamont, which were not downzoned to single family, like little strips, even though some of them were single family homes. And since then, more of them have become actually single family homes. But that was actually before University Edge apartments or anything. And we were told it's complicated, we're working on it, we want it all to be single family, but we just haven't gotten it to it yet. And then, you know, we just stopped pushing it because the homes were single family no matter what they were zoned. But, you know,
I understand. Okay. Well, thank you for that history lesson. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Mrs. Brown.
anything else?
Ms. Brown, thank you.
Yes.
Other comments from the public?
Oh, thank you.
Come forward if you have something to say, please. And your name and address, please.
My name's Michael Manzi. I'm at 609 Franklin Square Court in Johnson City. And all I have to say is I am also own 2 buildings downtown. It's not going to hurt the business downtown. I am trying to improve. We're on the park. Rafael Zambala, who is part of Stir Fry Group, is part of this bakery. It's going to be done first class. And we're also trying to tie in with the park. There is a need, I feel, for people to go out and walk their dogs. We're going to have stuff for the dogs, such as stuff that we're going to sell for them as well. We're going to have coffee. We're going to have quick go stuff, and of course bakery stuff, and outdoor seating. And I think it's going to be a great addition. It's very busy on the State of Franklin Road as well, and they can see it as well when they come into the park. And like she said, the park is very busy, but there's no place on that side where to grab something real quick and go. And I know in the wintertime when they have the Christmas trees up and all the special things that we do in that park, we'll be part of it. And it's going to be beautiful. It's going to be farmhouse style. Not so much, the picture you saw is what we could come close to, but it's going to be beautiful farmhouse style. And it's going to be done first class, just like my building on Tipton Street or what I did with Freiberg's. So I'm just telling you that I am about the community. I am at the edge of the property of the neighborhood, and I don't think I'm going to impact them at all.
The orientation of the building, will it be kind of perpendicular to State of Franklin?
Yeah, it's,
So the end will be facing State of Franklin and the front will be facing Founders Park, basically?
yeah, it's, yeah. And
Okay.
right now, that's how we're doing it, the front facing Founder Park. But the parking is, it's kind of, we have it on the, can you pull the lot back? So, thanks. Yeah. So if you see the heavy shaded, that's the building, and then you see where the parking lot is, and the front door's right dead in the middle. And, oh, sorry.
So that's facing the parking lot, not the.
Yeah, it's facing the parking lot.
Oh, so it is facing.
It is
State of
facing the
Franklin.
parking lot, yeah, sorry. It's facing the parking lot, there's the front door. We're gonna have little stairs to go up to here, because it is up on a hill. And, yeah, and we'll probably have a door on the side as well.
Okay.
And this is front porch. So outdoor seating. And we're gonna have a bike rack too for the people to park their bikes and lock up their bikes if they wanna do that as well. So it's totally community focused, totally park focused.
Thank you very much.
Welcome.
Any other comment from the public? Seeing none, I'll close the floor for public comment and offer for conversation amongst the commission to ask for questions of staff or talk amongst ourselves.
So, from a design standpoint, Whitney, and Mike, you might have to answer this question. If he's gonna have steps come up from the parking area, is there an easement there that we have to grant to have
That'll-
connectivity to the parking area?
I'm going to say yes, but I'm looking at engineering.
We have to work out that detail, but presumably not, because the public parking lot already allows public access. And so what he would simply be doing is just bringing that down to the property line.
So would there have to be a sidewalk that would run linear to the parking?
It would run perpendicular to the parking.
He's not adding a sidewalk here.
Oh, well, that's my
Yeah.
question.
Yeah,
Do you-
no, he's
you
not
don't
adding,
have
it's
to
just, no, he doesn't have
For
to.
connectivity?
He doesn't have,
He's providing it perpendicular.
if he brings a walk this way,
You can see one on the left, he has a sidewalk in the drawing there, on the left,
oh, sorry, right here.
right there. Yeah.
Okay.
And you showed us a list of things that could be built there right now on I-2.
Yes.
Which is heavy industrial.
Yes. And I do want to say that, yes, when the neighborhood meeting was there was a mistake that I made. I'll just own up to my mistake, about 1,000 square feet, which is why Mr. Manzi and I have been going back and forth to make sure that I understand everything about his request and that the public understands everything about his request. So that's why there was some change in plan, so that we can be transparent. And
Mistakes happen.
And using Dilworth as an example, if you are familiar with Charlotte and Freedom Park, how East Boulevard has developed in the last 10 years, as far as businesses being adjacent to Park, because the Freedom Park is on one end, kind of like Founders Park, Freedom Park is on one end. And as you go up East Boulevard, there are businesses and things that are neighborhood in scale that are walkable to the Dilworth neighborhood. So there are some parallels in how that development has occurred.
Can I say one more thing?
Sorry, hold on. He hasn't reopened the public hearing.
Okay.
I'll open the floor for public, for your comment, please. Come up to the podium.
I just want to add one thing, since Mr. Brock brought up the I-2. There's a lot of people approach me because this property is people want to park dump trucks there. I'm just telling you, and I don't want that. And I want what's best for the city. And so it is zoned industrial, and I think that rezoning it and putting a coffee shop there would be best for the city and for the people of the community. And that's what I'm about, always have been. I've been downtown since '07, and I started and I invested before anyone else did. So that's all I wanted to say.
Thank you. Floor is closed. More conversation or questions?
Jamie, did you get your question answered?
Yes,
As
ma'am.
far
Thank
as
you.
When you made it about the parking,
Yes, ma'am.
do you still stand by your recommendation that it go to committee?
Oh, as far as the MX1, just the rules on parking for MX1, it's a side issue it doesn't really affect this issue tonight, but as we move forward, I would like to look at it.
Other comments?
I'd like to make a comment. Basically, the MX is for neighborhood partial commercial development, and I think this is a good use for it. I can appreciate your parking issues in the other neighborhood streets, but I think that's a separate issue from this location, which is at the end of Founders Park. And anything we can do to enhance that park and the people around it and provide proper services, I'd be very much for.
In the form
I
of a
would-
motion?
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, no.
I would just second those comments. I think these are separate issues, and I think we all want to give due respect to the issues that you're speaking about, but I don't know that this particular zoning request is the right way to address those issues, or that they are really necessarily as co-entangled as you may think they are. So that would just be my comment.
Mr. Chair, may I?
Yes, sir.
Two things, if you would allow. One, I appreciate your comments, Commissioner Mays, because yes, those comments regarding the streets and the street connections and the alleys and parking in the Mountain Home neighborhood are absolutely serious concerns that we as a city both understand and empathize with and can study. If you recall recently, with conversation over the Browns Mill multifamily rezoning, Phil Pinzola, the Director of Public Works, got very involved with that rezoning because of the concerns along Browns Mill Road. And so I think it shows that, at the department head level, down all the way through the Public Works department, which includes engineering, Mr. Pinzola takes that very seriously. And so I can assure you that I, as the department head for planning, would be happy to reach out to Mr. Pinzola and ask about ways that we can study and look at improving connectivity and other traffic concerns within the Mountain Home neighborhood. Absolutely. The second, just because it was stated on record in this meeting, I want to make one thing clear. In terms of the petition, the petition that was made reference to was referencing an old rezoning that has since died. And so please understand that if there was to be a petition submitted on this particular rezoning, it would need to be a petition referencing this rezoning. The rezoning that was referenced going back to July was a rezoning that was staff initiated that was denied and killed at the city commission. So we would need for any petition to be referenced, to reference this particular rezoning. But otherwise, thank you, and you know, like I said, I'll be happy to reach out to Mr. Pinzola.
Thank you. All right, any other comments? Anyone have a motion?
I think Ms. Brown wanted to make
Yes.
a comment.
Ms. Brown, would you come back to the podium, please? I'm going to open the floor for you to speak.
Actually, the petition was any rezoning because people said, you know, the city is going to do lot by lot if they don't do it all at once. So the petition is still applicable to this. That any other questions?
No, thank you.
Thank you.
Floor is closed.
I'll make a motion that we approve the rezoning request.
A second.
You seconded? All right. Any other discussion about the motion? Nicole, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Bailey,
Yes.
Commissioner Brock,
Yes.
Commissioner Mays,
Yes.
Commissioner Oshinbaum,
Yes.
Commissioner Pavlich,
Yes.
Commissioner Rhodey,
Yes.
and Chairman Dagenhart.
Yes.
Motion approved as presented.
Thank you very much. All right, Ms. Warren, I believe you've got the staff presentation for the South Roan Street at University Parkway project.
Hello, Commissioners. All right, so what I have in front of you is a rezoning for the corner of South Roan Street and University Parkway. They are requesting to go from R1 Low Density Residential District to PB Planned Business District. Now, the request is to rezone actually a sliver of the parcel. It's going to be a 0.41 acre portion in the middle of the property. This is currently zoned R1. This is currently zoned PB, and they're essentially asking to just expand that zoning right there. So as you can see, this whole thing, it's kind of hard to see on the other map, but this whole thing is one giant parcel. And so it is currently split zoned as is. I will note that while it might look like they're trying to just kind of extend that split zoning, there will be a subsequent subdivision in process. It's in the planning department right now. They're going through some revisions on the plat, but there is a subsequent rezoning that will come in the future months. Here is the concept plan. This is a good idea of what you could expect to see in the rezoning when that, or in the subdivision when that plat comes forward. But this is the concept plan. It's essentially going to have 3 total lots. This side right here is going to be residential. This site down here at the corner is going to be a Dollar General site. This site right here does not have a defined tenant, and therefore will be any allowable use within the planned business district, but it will have to meet all of the zoning requirements within that district. As you can see right here, they have a shared point of ingress and egress that will have access to both directions of South Roan Street. And for the Dollar General down here, which I will like to note that the Dollar General as is meets the requirements for the planned business district. So regardless of this rezoning, this development right here is acceptable. The line that we are talking about right here is this current zoning line that they're asking to extend so that they can get kind of an additional commercial lot out of this. Here are a couple photos of the property. It is currently undeveloped. And here we have our current land use map. Again, it's vacant. The future land use map does indicate this is going to be residential, but I will say that due to its proximity to, you know, an arterial and a collector street, staff believes that commercial development would be appropriate on the property. There was a neighborhood meeting held on September 9th at 6 p.m., and there was a person in attendance. Their concerns were predominantly over traffic in the area, but it was kind of, staff responded that the rezoning itself doesn't necessarily have anything to do with the point of ingress and egress of the Dollar General, because it actually is not within that rezoning property line. And staff recommends approval, and there are a few bridge plan policies in support of that. And we'll end on a vicinity map.
Like questions for staff?
I do on access to this property. I know it well. We looked at it a few years ago to, I think Arby's was going to move over there or something. And, access, getting in and out was one of the big things, because we're not willing to make any cuts on University Parkway side, but this would be on South Roan. That is kind of a dicey area. I mean, if you come out of Walgreens, you can only go right. You can't turn left. So I thought I heard you say you could come out of this property and go either left or right.
That is correct. So I'm going to go and pull up this concept plan. This right here, they have made a cut in the median in order to provide for that, and that is going to be a dedicated turn lane, and this is going to be a deceleration lane. So you are able to access both sides of South Roan.
How close will that entrance and exit be to the top of the hill there? Because, I mean, when you're coming out on Highland and want to turn left, boy, you have to just really, really speed up, because somebody's going to come over the hill and boom, you're broadsided.
Right.
So
I can't quite speak to sight distance issues, so I'm going to kind of look to
I
Public Works
guess
for that one.
engineering has looked at it and they're saying that there's adequate sight distance.
You can see the current right-of-way line is right around in here, and we're asking for them to dedicate that line straight up to here.
Oh,
And then Phil could come in there and lay that hillside back to improve the sight distance, but it still doesn't meet the sight distance needed for that, for the speed.
So how close is that entrance to the actual red light?
It's greater than 75 feet, so.
Would you say that again on sight distance? It does not meet the sight distance.
It doesn't, but, we're going to try to improve it as much as we can. But I don't think you can bring it further back down here, and you're getting into that zone of where you want to be more than 75 foot away from the intersection.
So if sight distance is not met, are you going to allow only a right-hand turn?
Well, we're allowing lefts out as well.
I think is it an existing problem right now that sight distance is not met anywhere on the street?
Yeah, well,
Right.
and that sight distance is up here at Highland.
Right.
So this is going to meet sight distance here. I guess I misspoke.
But even if you were coming out of that property and going to turn left, go back toward University Parkway, I mean, you got traffic coming that direction over that hill.
I guess I misspoke. Yeah, it's going to meet sight distance for this part right here, but up at East Highland, there are issues, and that's what I was trying to address. It was when we get this dedication of the right of way up through here, it's going to improve the sight distance at Highland.
Okay.
So for a left-hand turn out of that property, there is proper sight
Yes.
distance? Okay. That's
Yeah,
my
sorry
question.
about the confusion.
Yeah, it's all right.
We wanted to try to help up at East Highland, like you're saying, it is an issue
It
there,
is.
so.
How
that's-
long are the deceleration lanes that you anticipate having access to? How many linear feet?
This deceleration lane
Yes, and then the one on the opposite side of the road.
and this over here.
Right.
Keep in mind, too, that the engineer for the project is here, so he could answer some of these technical questions about the exact distances.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that'd probably be better.
Thank
for him
you.
to answer that. All right.
I do have one final question before you sit down.
Sure, no problem.
If I'm turning right,
Yes.
I will be on an acceleration lane for a little while before I merge out onto South Roan?
If you're turning right from this
From-
development,
Mm-hmm. Or do I immediately get on Roan Street?
you're immediately getting onto Roan
Okay.
Street, so there is no acceleration lane.
So that may worsen the problem, the line of sight for people who are coming out on Highland, because now you've got a lot more traffic coming. You can kind of count on when the traffic line on the state of Franklin controls the flow of traffic.
Right.
You can get out on Highland because there's a gap. So now we're saying maybe there's not gonna be a gap like we were used to be able to get out. I travel that way a lot, so.
Yes.
I'm speaking firsthand.
Okay. Yeah, sorry about the confusion on the,
Yeah,
on
yeah.
the other, on the East Highland. Yes.
So there's just one ingress and egress off of this property, period.
Right, there's no ingress and egress down on the University Parkway, so,
And nothing on Highland.
no. We're gonna ask these guys to maybe move this back a little bit further just for the internal. You could get some stacking in here, but, other than that, you've got the deceleration lane coming in there, and I think it meets our needs.
Right.
And the storage as well. We didn't want to cut off too much of this median right here. If you increase the storage, you could have some people trying to come around and do a U-turn out of Walgreens and go back up.
That's what I was gonna ask.
Yeah.
That's where the Walgreens,
Yes, this is where the.
I can
Walgreens-
imagine if you're gonna let them turn left out of that.
Yeah.
Develop, why won't you let us turn left out of it?
Right. So. yeah,
And it'll
we-
be pretty close to where that gap's gonna be?
Could be 2 lanes.
Yeah. It would still be difficult. You're not gonna,
Come down to
yeah,
U-turn.
it would be very difficult to do that. So we didn't want to come back further with more storage. Then it makes it a lot easier for them to just come back out here and try to come back up. And that's kind of defeats the purpose of why we had the right in, right out on Walgreens.
All right, any more questions for staff? All right, I'll open the floor for public comment. If you've got something to share with us, please come forward and give your name and address.
I'm Ben Berry with Berry Engineers, civil engineer for the project. Just to kind of address a few of the things that I've heard, and actually a lot of this was what was discussed at with the gentleman that was at the neighborhood meeting as well, was traffic. That was his main focus and main concern. But to go back to the request and the reason for it, everything up to this line is currently PB. We have a user that is going to purchase the front half of this, but isn't going to use the entire PB property. So what remains is a zoning area that's really a little too small to be effectively utilized in the future. And so what we did is we looked, if we can go that aerial, you would just go this way? Okay. So what we're essentially doing is asking you to move the rezoning line from approximately this location about 70 feet north, which lines up, it's actually a little bit further back, but it lines up approximately with this property line of the existing residences along East Highland, with the thought that this R1 area would be sold in the future to somebody that wanted to build a house, and they would access off of East Highland. So one of the questions was about, will there be any access off of East Highland? There might be, but it would be residential for the R1. There will not be any access off of East Highland for the commercial, which is at the southern end. In looking at the property that's left, of course, this is what's immediately slated for development under the current zoning, and then this would be marketed for a future tenant. It's a second-level commercial property, so you're not going to get RVs, gas stations. You're not going to get the high-traffic users for that property. You're probably going to get, a local insurance agent, some other office-type use, I would imagine. We were speculating, but just based on property location and value, that's typically what we see. And actually, on the front parcel, it's a retail. It is Dollar General. It's actually, from a traffic standpoint, kind of a best-case scenario for a commercial user. They don't generate near as much traffic as Arby's, fast food restaurants, a lot of the other uses that are in the PB zone. And we have worked extensively with TDOT on University Parkway and also with the city on identifying a safe location for access. It'll be one driveway location shared between the two parcels. There's no ideal location on this entire property, but we picked something that does work and we feel will be safe, keeping this right in, right out. One thing to note, this new proposed zoning line is actually at the top of the hill. So that was one of the questions, is where's the top of the hill? The top of the hill is lined up. This goes down kind of the center of the top of the hill. So with this rezoning, the R1 would be on one side of the ridge, the PB would be on the other. There would be a buffer across the top. And that's really the request.
So to the top of the the next zoning, 300 feet, 150 feet from the entrance?
Oh, from the entrance here to the top of the hill
Yes, sir.
at this point? Let me pull some, I've got the dimensions here. It's hard to see on that screen. It's between 250 and 300.
300's our normal site distance,
Yeah.
is that right? Is 300 our normal site distance?
Actually, it's probably closer to 250. So the distance from here to here, looks like 200 feet. And just judging, that's about the same, so it's going to be a little over 200 feet to the top of the hill.
Okay. Right, 275-ish. All right, thank you.
I'd like to ask you a question in a different vein altogether. This is on the edge of a pretty well-established and long-existing neighborhood. It's got a character to itself. Do you think your client would consider some aesthetic to their property that would make it more transitional between commercial and the neighborhood, considering that it's Dollar General that has sort of creates a view in my mind?
Yeah, we have recently built and opened a new Dollar General on Watauga Road. It would be in a similar vein to that store. It's the
Could you
same-
describe what's different about it, please?
No, this would be similar to that.
Well,
This is-
how that's different than the typical Dollar General? I'm not familiar with that property immediately.
So their Dollar General is probably the biggest retailer in the country as far as number of stores.
Yes.
So what people have in their minds can be anything from a 1990s Dollar General to something that's new. So I would say that this would be the typical new store, which is an upgrade from stores that they've done in the previous version. But you still have, it's still a metal building on the sides and back, and it's masonry in the front. Of course, in the back on this actually has a type 1 buffer. It's vacant property behind it, but it's R1, so we're actually putting in evergreen.
So the front faces the main parking area?
The front faces the main parking area, which is South Roan Street.
Okay. And there's barrier facing University Parkway?
There's actually a topography change facing University Parkway, so this would sit kind of pretty high up on a hill. So it sits back pretty far from University Parkway and also sits pretty far up.
Okay.
So do we not have an overlay in that particular area? Any type of building code overlay?
I don't know how far down University Parkway it goes. If we have one, it would be that, University Parkway.
Is it?
I don't know if Preston knows or not.
I don't do much with buildings as a civil engineer, so
Understand.
apologize for not having great
Your-
answers other than the store we just.
Your stormwater is gonna be underground under the parking lot like on Watauga?
It is for the front Dollar General.
I would like to say, I really like what y'all have done in use of this property, because there was a pretty magnificent house that sat right on the Highland side. It was all residential, and of course, all that property was a part of the house. But I think that kind of buffers the development over the hill for commercial, and you've got residential that abuts the rest of the neighborhood, and I think you've done a good job on that.
Thank you. I will say, if you haven't been in Dollar General, and especially the new one, if you go into the one in Watauga, their stores are very different now and moving forward than they have been in the past with what they put in it. It's a lot more milk, eggs, fresh produce. They've definitely slanted more towards the grocery side, which is really one of the reasons for their growth moving forward. But it's also made it a lot more useful for neighborhoods that they're adjacent to. I did hear from several people that the Watauga Road site has been very, very well received in that area. It makes it a quicker stop than a grocery store, but you can get some of the essentials as opposed to just batteries and kid trinkets.
Thank you.
There's going to be a lot of development at that intersection as the shopping center across the street on South Roan is going to be redeveloped.
Mhm. Thank you. Thank you very much. Any other public comment? Please come forward and give us your name and address.
My name's Dale Webb. I live directly across the street from where they're proposing at 105 East Highland Road. Okay, I was out there 3 times today just to walk off the property to find out where traffic was going, what was going to be the distance line of sight from Highland Road to where I believe they were wanting to cut the median to. You have approximately 300 feet. They're wanting to cut the median approximately 100 feet coming up the hill from Arby's area going towards town. Okay, from that line of sight, you've got about 120 feet to come over that hill, not quite even 120 feet. From where you top that hill, you come up on somebody slowing down to turn, or even worse, coming across the street. If it's wet, you'll never make it. We've got people that fly up and down South Roan constantly. Like I said, I live right there. You can hear motorcycles and cars at night, which not much traffic at night. They're doing 100 miles an hour up South Roan, just winding it out. Okay? I don't have a problem with the dollar store coming down to that corner, none whatsoever. But I would strongly suggest you get somebody out there with a tape measure and drive that area. I did this, I shouldn't have, but I did it. I pulled right across from Walgreens there. Pulled my truck up against the curb as far as I could go, like if I just pulled out of Walgreens. This was today, about, almost 5 o'clock. And I stopped, put my emergency flashers on. Sat there and looked in my rear view mirror and watched them come over the hill like they're coming from downtown Johnson City. Almost immediately, brakes started slamming on. Coming over that hill, they almost piled up for me doing what I did. Like I said, I shouldn't have done it, but I did it. I just wanted to see what would happen. That's all I can say.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Webb.
Hey, my name is Josh Roark. I live at 114 East Highland, right next door to the property. Sorry, 114 East Highland, Josh Roark. My biggest concern, one, is the traffic. I drive it every day, come out the end of the road, get on the interstate, and where they're coming from University across to East Highland, they come flying across there, especially if they're trying to go past the red light and they've already got the speed built up. I also have 4 young children, 10, 8, 5, and 3, and the proposal moving that property back, or the rezoning, comes up to about halfway onto my property. It's not where you said it was. So my biggest concern is my kids' safety. I mean, that's the way it always should be. But more traffic means more people that come in contact with my children playing in my backyard.
Are you right next door to where the old house that was torn down is?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. I'm looking
And
at
it was a
right.
beautiful house.
It was,
I
yeah.
hate that it got torn down.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Any other comment? I'll close the floor, seeing no other comment, and open the discussion up amongst us.
Well,
I'm sorry.
This is staff, it's not public comment.
Yeah, I'd like to clarify. You're right, I think it's 330 is the site distance, and I think the decel lane was picked up by TDOT when they developed University Parkway there, so that's kind of where the location's kind of been decided. There's not really a good place to put that to be able to meet the site distance. So it's we're kind of hemmed in to where they can have that, and they've got the decel lane up as far as they can. And because of the intersection and everything, that's probably the best location for it. So,
So you have the decel lane, but do you have I think Jenny brought up an acceleration lane
yeah,
earlier?
there's no area for an acceleration.
I think it's pretty steep right in that
Yeah,
area. I don't know
so-
how you would do it.
You could try to move the entrance further down the hill, but now you're probably gonna be messed up with the stacking coming from the stop at the stoplight. So I think-
Stacking turning left.
If you're coming down the hill on South Roan and trying to go across University Parkway.
To turn into the property.
Yeah.
I've got two questions.
Sure.
If that's okay.
Sure.
One is that if we do change and approve this, it looks like the type 1 buffer only goes to the area that's zoned currently. So it doesn't advance into the new area that would be zoned on the draw up, which would kind of impact his property because the new section would include that part of his property. So right there. Yeah. So does that area there also include type 1 buffer right there?
Yes.
It does.
Yeah, it would be the whole portion.
The whole portion?
Yeah, it's
Okay.
almost anywhere that it's.
Okay, great. Second question is that from the aerial pictures and driving around, I didn't see any sidewalks on any of these barriers. Is that correct? On any of this land that abuts Roan and
Correct.
University Parkway?
And I believe they're putting a sidewalk here and then coming up and ending it here. And we're asking them to put in a handicap ramp to provide access to here. And then Phil would end up putting crosswalks in here to be able to get people across over to this side where there are sidewalks.
I see. Okay, but if anybody coming from the neighborhoods would want to access, they would not have a sidewalk to access
Yes.
unless they cross the street?
Right.
Okay.
Can I ask another traffic
Why?
question? When this came up, Mr. Mitchell, I don't think you were here at the time when we were looking at it before, but there are cutouts all along University Parkway that go into other businesses, just right up on, up at Walgreens, and you can see that happening. Will we not even consider one on University Parkway because of its close proximity to the intersection, or is it on are there rules to say you can't have, a cutout that close?
Yeah, I think when the Arby's was here, Alan kind of said, yeah, we don't want an entrance on the University Parkway, and I think the commission kind of overruled that. And I guess the Arby's development kind of died. But I think when he brought it up to planning commission, they were like, no, you can provide access. So I guess you could do that.
Aren't there,
I think there was also discussions with TDOT that they were going to do the off-ramp differently. They were
Yeah.
going to redesign that.
There was
think-
something,
yeah.
and that's what I'm just trying to recall. Was it something to do with TDOT or just,
And you would,
We were
if you were gonna
concerned.
access the state route, you'd have to have an application to go into TDOT, and then they'd have their say on that. We'd try to line up our thoughts first with TDOT before we, made comments back, or review comments back to the developer.
But it looked like, since they did the road improvement with TDOT, it looks like they probably are not going to do that improvement where they were coming off this,
I don't know.
Okay, this is just a soapbox moment for me. I don't understand why, if this is considered an improvement to a piece of property, why are we not gonna connect a sidewalk to Highland, all the way to Highland?
It just doesn't have to be shown until that middle parcel gets developed. So it's not that it's not gonna be there, it just doesn't have to be on the concept plan yet until that middle parcel is developed.
Until there's a dwelling on that middle parcel?
Until it comes up for,
I think they put in the construction plans for the Dollar General, but they don't have the plans in yet for the.
So who would be responsible for the last portion? For the R1? Is that the city? So I mean, we're having sidewalks to nowhere.
Well, not really. It's,
Yes,
I understand the question. I wanted to give Peyton an opportunity to be able to, and she did that was her, first of all, that was her first official presentation, and I want.
Home run.
It was an absolute home run. She did a fantastic job. And so, some of the Q&A, this is some of the hard stuff, and so we'll get there. But the development itself is providing the required sidewalk along both street frontages. The concept plan is identifying the concept that's tied to the rezoning. Keep in mind, as Mr. Berry pointed out, the rezoning is really only this 70-foot piece of this whole lot. So it's a little strange that there's this legislative action going on for just a small little sliver of land. The development rights, all the entitlements, all the ability to do the Dollar General can happen if we all just walk out of here.
No,
And
I get all that.
So, right, and so the concept plan is simply identifying that there's a request to extend the PB by roughly 70 feet. But that concept plan, because it is an unknown development at this time, and so what they're asking for is that all of the rights and entitlements that go with the PB be applied to that center lot. And so then, when and if this lot is developed, that's an amendment, kind of like we were talking about with the amendment to the concept plan for the previous rezoning, or actually I think that was on the subdivision, but we've had 3 concept plans in a row here. And so when and if this development occurs, that's an amendment to this concept plan. So this concept plan will have to come back before you again, before the Planning Commission and before the City Commission. And when that concept is shown on this middle lot, the sidewalk would be shown. The residential lot as well, because it's simply tied to this concept, would also be a third amendment to the concept plan. And so the reason why that's important and the reason why concept plans are important is because it shows not only you all, but the general public, it gives an expectation of what's going to happen on that land, as opposed to just a general rezoning where any and all of the rights and development standards under the general zone could happen. The concept plan gives the public a view of what's coming. And then where something's not identified, that's an amendment to that plan. And so it brings back this public process again. So it works. It makes it lengthier on the developer, but that's because of the expectation that is set in front of the public eye.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
It does, but I guess my point is, for the last portion, I understand the sidewalk will go all the way through what is commercial.
Right.
The last part being residential, there's a sidewalk on Highland. And we're gonna not have a sidewalk from the business to Highland.
We will eventually.
Who's gonna put it in?
The developer of the
Whoever
rest of that
develops
property.
each lot.
On the residential?
Right.
Okay,
Right.
interesting. Thank you.
And if there was question, only because it was noted by a gentleman who spoke, I believe the second gentleman that spoke lives here. His lot comes all the way back to this point. There are these 2 lines that run parallel. And so, just for clarification, the 70 feet pushes up to about this point right here. And so, just wanted to note that it is a shrinking of the R1, but it would be that new zone line would fall roughly in line with the properties that are to the right of him, or to the northeast of his property.
Thank you.
All right, any other conversation or questions for staff? Please come forward. I'll reopen the floor.
All I ask is please come up there during rush hour, experience it for yourself. Making a dangerous place a lot more dangerous. That's all I ask.
Thank you. Any conversation?
I think as has been pointed out, what we're considering is a rezoning of this particular area. There's not a good solution for entering and exiting that particular lot on that corner. From my understanding, and I'm an engineer, but I don't believe TDOT regulations would allow an entrance on University as it currently exists. Now, maybe that's not correct, but that's what I think is correct. So a lot of the discussion is focusing on entering and exiting a parcel that, is really it's already been rezoned. They have a site plan that meets our requirements. And so while I understand completely the concern, I don't know that it has any real bearing on the decision of whether or not this rezoning is appropriate or not, which I think it is appropriate given the circumstances. So that would be my comment.
Can I hear?
Mr.
Go
Chairman,
ahead.
if I could just add one thing, and you made me think about this, Commissioner Mays, is that as Ms. Voren noted, there's still a subdivision plat that is to come. And so you will have another round at this with the subdivision plat.
Thank you for that notice. Discussion, further comments? Do I hear a motion?
I'll move to approve the rezoning request.
I second it.
Any further discussion amongst the commission?
I'll just add that, of course, this will come on to the city commission for 3 readings. And in the meantime, to totally verify the cutoff on University Parkway, let's get all those facts back again to see if there's any possibility there. And then further scrutiny about, any other ideas on how this could work so that we mitigate any of those line of sight issues that have been brought up tonight.
So are you asking to amend the motion?
No, I'm just saying it's going to come on to the city commission, and
Oh, you're
they'll
just
be
saying.
asking these kind of questions, and I'm just kind of giving a heads up to say, let's go back to TDOT, let's do all those kind of things to verify that there may be a simple solution here if it could work, that would help with that.
Okay.
And the other issue is, do you just make it right in, right out? And that's what we were going to do back several years ago when the other project was being considered there. And that would cut out a lot of those issues.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second on the floor. Nicole, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Bailey?
Yes.
Commissioner Brock?
Yes.
Commissioner Mays?
Yes.
Commissioner Oshinbain?
Yes.
Commissioner Pavlich?
Yes.
Commissioner Rhodey? And Chairman Dagenhart?
Yes.
Motion approved.
All right, Ms. Warren, we have another item on Knob Creek Road. Can you please present the discussion?
Absolutely. So what I have before you is a rezoning request for 2311 Knob Creek, and they are asking to go from R2 low density residential to PB planned business district. So as you see here, this is the site, and they are requesting to rezone to allow for the adaptive reuse of the building that is already existing as office space. So here is the concept plan. Again, going along with the building that they are requesting to use is a single-family 27 square foot or 2,800 square foot building that they want to keep on the property, as well as use the existing egress and ingress point. Just a note that anything that goes in will have to meet all of the PB zoning requirements. This rezoning will trigger a buffer along this side, even though this is a vacant lot, and a type 2 buffer along this little sliver right here. We are potentially requesting to use the existing foliage that is there as the buffer, but eventually that will have to be approved by the city forester. He makes the final decision on if that's appropriate or not. And I would just like to note that any major changes to this plan would have to come back to you guys for a concept plan approval. Here's some photos of the property. This is kind of what I was saying, is that existing buffer right there. Now, the future land use actually designates this as medical services. Planned business is fairly similar to medical services as far as uses, so staff believes that this is in line with the future land use plan. There was a neighborhood meeting held on September 8th at 5 p.m., and there was no one in attendance, and staff does recommend approval, and these are some bridge plan policies that uphold that. And then I will leave you guys with the vicinity map.
Thank you.
Can you just run through again, real simple for me, why they've chosen PB? What is it, that they plan to do with this?
Yeah, absolutely. So the petitioner came to us, and he really wants to keep the existing house. He thinks that it is going to be a great office use space. And he said, office use, that's what I want. And so we kind of ran through the zoning districts that would allow for office use, and we decided that PB would kind of be the most appropriate in the area that allows for, whatever tenant comes in to have the most options and flexibility when using that house.
And with PB, what else could he add to that property then?
I'm not positive of all of the exact uses of the planned business district. I haven't quite memorized the zoning code yet.
It's been a month.
Well, it would be
I know,
amazing
I really
if you
should be
had.
more on top of it.
It'll be amazing if you ever memorize the whole thing.
Because we may just change it.
I think that might be bad for your health.
Yeah, right.
So this property kind of laps over into the Estate Drive neighborhood there, kind of cuts back in there.
Right, a little
But I
bit, yes,
don't
ma'am.
think, there are no houses that back up to this property, I don't believe.
It does kind of, this first house right here kind of touches it. I wouldn't say that it necessarily backs up to it. All right, so I'm just going to read off the allowed uses. So there is alternative tower structures, amusements and recreation, including theaters, beer serving / sales establishment, clinics, daycare centers, financial institutions, home occupations, municipal, county, state, or federal building, neighborhood convenience centers, offices, personal, business, and professional services, pharmacies, residential uses on the upper floor of buildings, restaurants, stores and shops conducting retail trade, and temporary uses.
And when you say adaptive reuse, does that preclude him replacing the building with another building?
No, so adaptive reuse is essentially when somebody goes in and uses the structure that's already there. So it's sort of a good thing from a planning standpoint because it's using the existing structure instead of, going and building something on a brand new lot or taking down and rebuilding.
But it does keep him from taking it down and building another building.
If he does that, he will have to come back in front of you guys, yes,
Okay.
sir.
But he
That's what I
could
wanted to-
add a radio tower, an antenna?
I believe that would have to come back in front of you guys,
Okay, even though it says on the PB he could do that?
even though it's allowed. Essentially, any additional development would have to
Okay.
come back in front of you guys.
Thank
But
you.
on R2, he could not put an antenna up.
I'm not positive. Again, if I just had memorized it.
In the county, antennas can go up anywhere as long as they have a design plan. I don't know about in the city or not.
No, and if R2, if you could go in the
Yeah.
middle of a neighborhood, I'm not sure either.
Well, they usually go up A1.
I think Jamie's got one close to him, right?
Whitney, are you looking?
Yeah, that's right.
I believe Whitney's
That's cell phone
checking
service
right
in
now.
town.
Yeah.
Could we see the zoning map around right through there? Or I guess kind of the,
So is this existing M1, was it M1 medical?
Around him?
oh, I think maybe you had it there. Yeah, there you go.
So there's no.
I'll kind of say that I have a little,
Let's,
I'm sorry.
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
let's go ahead.
I was kind of say that I have a little bit of a different insight on this because my partner and I are almost 200 feet catty corner to this, and we took an existing residential structure that was a home that really made no sense on Knob Creek Road and have turned it into an office for our law firm, which is right there next to the medical offices across the street. And it's been wonderful, I think, and I hope that it's a business neighborhood, it's a business district, so we're not going to hear any feedback unless it's bad, not like a residential, but I was wondering, I don't know what ours, I don't believe ours is medical service. I was wondering if ours was zoned a mixed use, because we didn't have to come back for any kind of zoning because of the change in use. We could, convert it to an existing office. And that's what I was just trying to think. What were we were we PB one or
Are
something
you on
else?
the south side of Knob Creek or on the north side?
The south side.
Okay, and
No,
so,
no, I'm sorry, the other side.
You're the house that
side
was
over here.
moved there,
We're the
right?
house that was moved, right,
Yeah.
yes.
And it was resident, somebody lived in it.
It was
first.
residential until, yes.
so, if you're up here on this north side, then almost all of that is MS1, medical services.
Oh, okay, so it was a grandfathered residential use in MS1.
Right.
Okay.
Right. So if I could kind of address a couple of things. As Ms. Voren had noted, we had gone back and forth with the applicant on both MS1 and the PB. The planned business is a smaller scale, a little more intimate type commercial zoning district than you would have in your more conventional B4 state of Franklin type zoning, which allows Lowe's, home improvement centers, that kind of thing. PB scales it down. Doesn't scale it down as much as MX1, like we've talked about with Mr. Manzi's project, but it's kind of in between the mixed use and your B4, so it falls right there in the middle. It does allow for, we obviously, as your planning staff, need to be fully transparent about that. As you heard, it does allow for some commercial uses that you might not find in a more traditional, pure institutional or business zone. So it does include restaurants. It does include small scale retail. But as was asked, the telecommunications, it allows what's called an alternative tower structure, which doesn't necessarily equate to a tall 4G tower. And so if you were to apply the MS1, let's say that we skipped the PB and went with the MS1, which is across the street, it also allows for alternative tower structures. So you could do an alternative tower structure just across the street, as well as on this side of the street. You actually find the land use alternative tower structure found throughout multiple commercial zones because of the ability to have a good spread of your cellular service. What's interesting about these sites is that, and I'm glad you all are having this conversation about adaptive reuse versus redevelopment and what's happened along Knob Creek Road. You'll see that here on this left-hand side, this is the very outer edge here of the MedTech large-scale development. MedTech is all zoned MX. These developments on the north side of Knob Creek came in, and these obviously predate me, but they came in what I presume to be either roughly around the same time as MedTech was being developed or shortly after. And so you had the MS1 provided here that provided for these inline office spaces. It is most likely that this property will just from my experience, I think the market's going to want this site to be redeveloped. But this owner is looking to take this incrementally. And so we applaud him for that incremental approach. He's saying, no, you know what? I'm okay with leaving the house there. I want to sell the property as is. I'm going to encourage adaptive reuse, and so that's what his concept plan is asking for. So we applaud that incremental approach, knowing, and he knows very well because of our conversations with him, that if this is seeking redevelopment, it's going to have to come back through you for a concept plan amendment. So it's an incremental approach. Is the district just a hair more intensive than the MS1? Yes, but that was part of the conversation. But it still falls well below the traditional B4. Does that help?
Thank you. I don't think we've opened the floor for public comment. Let's go ahead and do that and see if anybody here to speak to the question. I think that would be you. If you could please give us your name and address.
My name is Jerry Petzel. I work for TCI Group, commercial real estate broker, 221 Cumberland Street, Kingsport. This property is owned by William T. Muse Sr. He was there before any development around there ever occurred. He's been there since the 60s. Back in the 60s, he started a business where he installed sprinkler systems. And his original property included the building in the left bottom corner and that strip that goes out to Knob Creek Road. And a few years ago, the reason Mr. Muse is not here, he's in serious failing health, so he's hired me to sell the property. The building in the left bottom corner was his business. He did all his office work and lived in the house, him and his wife. They did that for years. He wanted to live where he worked. And several years ago, he sold the sprinkler business and the real estate and had it subdivided so that he could sell the real estate. So over the past 20 years, he has lived there as his residence, and it served him well. It's a one-level home, fine gentleman. And so in representing the property, we have to be able to represent its use. That's what initiated my request on behalf of Mr. Muse, and he agreed to have it rezoned business of some sort. We believe that the use of the property will change by use, not necessarily by physical buildings, but it could. But they would have to bring them back through the Planning Commission to have any approval. It's the type of site that I, quite honestly, would never see massive redevelopment in terms of site and blasting and all that, because this is a very highly sensitive area for caverns and underground drainage and all of that, and someone would not want to take the risk, I don't believe, in messing with Mother Earth and rocking the foundation of that rock community. I was involved in developing the subdivision next door, Biltmore Estates, I named it. J. Fred Brooks and I developed it. The site next to it, it's a sinkhole. It's not buildable. That's why it was never built. It was sold. So again, the objective is to get it rezoned so that we can represent Mr. Muse the best way we can and say, yes, this property can be used for law offices. It could be used for accounting offices. It could be a veterinarian clinic, perhaps. It could be a daycare center. A lot of great uses. It's a great piece of property. It's a great location. And any change of physical use to the property, they would have to bring it back to the commission. So we respectfully request that you approve it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I'll close I think there's nobody else here to speak to the question. I'll close the floor. Any conversation amongst us or any further questions? Seeing none, you know what I think, what I'm asking for? Somebody get a motion? Can I get a motion?
I move for approval of rezoning 1083 there at 2111 Knob Creek Road.
Second.
Do we need to include the buffers?
Okay, we've got a motion and a second. Nicole, would you please call the roll?
Commissioner Bailey?
Yes.
Commissioner Brock?
Yes.
Commissioner Mays?
Yes.
Commissioner Oshenbein?
Yes.
Commissioner Pavlich?
Yes.
Commissioner Rhodey?
Yes.
And Chairman Dagenhart.
Yes.
Motion approved.
All right, Ms. Hodges, I think we've got one more topic for this evening. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Thank you.
I'll start this one by saying that in your packet, you have several different requests to change the subdivision ordinance, one of which is streets. We've had some conversations with engineering, and we would like to defer that one till the October meeting, if that pleases you. But we also want to bring forward with the vesting and the, it's the street trees. I was like, street trees. So just to kind of open those up so that we can have the 30 days to talk about those. So if you had some questions about maybe why we were taking out street trees at this time or the vesting language, please let us know so that we can discuss those. And then we'll sit with that for 30 days and come back again.
Perfect. That was a great lead up. So allow me to, I'm going to hide the agenda here a little bit over here on the right. So anytime the Planning Commission wishes to amend your subdivision regulations, because you are the author and the approver of your own subdivision regulations, meaning subdivision regulations don't have to go in front of the City Commission. They are yours and yours alone. And so because of that, you can't just change them on the same meeting night. You have to have them introduced to you, and then you have a 30-day period, and then you consider that action at the next meeting. It's a little bit of a delay. It allows for due process, allows for you to have some public comment. After you've heard the initial introduction, you could have public comment at the next meeting. Very similar to the legislative process that starts here and goes ultimately to the City Commission. We had introduced the street cross-section changes to you at the last meeting, held a very successful committee meeting. Committee members seemed to be in favor, or I should just say understandable of the request and allowing staff to move forward with this. But as Whitney had noted, we have here in the last even just several days continued to work with engineering on some of the street cross-section details, and we really don't want the decision to be premature, so that's why we're asking that you consider this in October. But what I do want to do is, because the vesting piece and the street tree piece was not introduced to you at the last meeting, I want to introduce that to you so that you can then consider it at the next meeting. The changes on the vesting are really just that, or I should say not that. We are not asking to change anything. In fact, what we are asking is that we clarify some things and make our vesting language more in line with the state statutes. I realize there's a bunch of red and green up here, but for example, all of this that we are striking in this initial or in this upper paragraph here is really being moved down into the table. It's just, so it's being rewritten in a better manner. But where you can see green, that is new language, and where you see red, that is stricken or removed language. So, and then where you see just regular black and white, that is language that exists today, okay? So what we are proposing, for example, here in this first paragraph, is it clarifying from vesting to vested rights. To avoid undue hardship, new language, as may occur with changes to applicable development standards, an approved preliminary plat and subsequent construction plan shall be considered vested according to the table below. And so, again, this language is not being removed necessarily, it's just being better embedded into this table down here. Again, where you have black and white, that's just existing language. So for example, right now, the vesting just indicates it's a 3-year period from preliminary plat approval. Well, it's a little more than that when you look at the state statutes. And so state statutes say that it's both preliminary and construction plan gets 3 years of vesting from the Planning Commission approval. It's important to just clarify from your start date. You have an additional 2 years, and right now you'll see that the subregs just say 2 additional years with no clarifier, from the expiration of the initial 3 years. That's an important clarifier to build into the subregs. The required action for the initial 3-year vesting is obtain construction plan approval, secure necessary permits, and then the general statutes say, and commence site preparation within the vesting period. So that's something that we need to add. That's an important clarifier. The required action for the additional 2 years is if the above actions are completed during the initial vesting period. Construction to commence from the date of expiration of the initial 3-year vesting period, and then all permits shall be maintained. So I won't go through and continue reading this in detail, but what we've done here is really just clean this language up, better clarified the language with the existing state statutes, and tried to just make it better to read and clearer for our customer, for the developer. For those of you who are maybe not familiar with the term vesting or what are vested rights, I'll give you just a quick 101 on that. If a project comes through, preliminary plat comes through, and they receive preliminary plat approval from you, that then gives them the green light to go and put together their construction plans, their civil set, or what we also call horizontal construction. And so that preliminary plat, you're giving them the thumbs up. They go and then they spend all the money on the engineers to put together the construction plans. Those come in to engineering and to public works and to water and sewer. They get approved, and now they're off and running. So those plans get approved according to the subdivision regulations and the zoning code that is in effect at the time of approval, right? Okay, so let's say that 6 months later, after we approve their plans and they've gone and they've spent all of that money on the engineering set, and they're now deep in the pocket in grading and infrastructure and all of that. 6 months later, we come in and we make major changes to the subdivision regulations, or we make major changes to the zoning code. Well, that would be very unfair to the developer. He's 6 months into the project and say, guess what, pal? You've now got to change your project because we've just changed our codes. And so that's what vesting is. Vesting is a protection. It locks them in to the code that was in effect at the time of their approval. And so that's what this table outlines, is that after they get that initial approval, they have, by statute, they have 3 years to get started. And then once they get started, they get an automatic additional 2 years. And then beyond that, it's broken down into whether or not it's a single-phase project or a multi-phase project. But vested rights are very important. It allows the developer to have the appropriate time to move forward with the project and not be impacted by any regulatory or legislative changes in the local government. Does that make sense? So that piece is in there. Again, this language right in here is language that we are striking because it's either been better clarified in the table. Actually, it's been clarified in this last sentence. Termination of vesting rights, the superseding of vested rights, and the amendments to preliminary plats and construction plans is done according to the TCA, that's the general statutes, 13.3.413. Much of this language right in here, actually all of that language right in there, has been cut and pasted from the general statutes. That's not sound coding. It's better to instead make a reference to the statutes, because then if the statutes get modernized or updated in any way, we don't have to go and change our code. Does that make sense? So rather than cutting and pasting, you just make a reference to it. They can update it all day long. The piece on the street trees is right here. Forgive me. We had to give you the whole subregs because of, there we go. So where we are, we're in the streets section. The scope of these standards is to allow new streets and roads in the planning region to conform to our major thoroughfare plan. So we're in the section of your subregs that addresses how streets are to be designed and built. Well, down here, there is a section called street trees that says, although not required by these regulations, I'm not even going to finish the sentence. That, too, is unfortunately poor coding. It is, it sets us up for litigation to have language in the subdivision regulations that is not
Expressly not a recommend.
expressly required, exactly. And so it's great language. We need to, and certainly from a staff perspective, we want to encourage and require street trees when they are appropriate. But really, two things. One, you shouldn't ever start coding with although not required. We suggest, or we hope, that. But then number two, street trees really needs to be in the zoning code. That's really a zoning issue that needs to be added to our landscape chapter. And so that's something we will do, and then just suggest that it be removed in this particular case. So that's it. So we introduce these to you, and we'll bring them back to you next month for final action. Any questions?
Thank you for that discussion and explanation.
Sure, I know that's thick stuff, forgive me, but just had to get through it.
Any questions about this topic? We'll see it again next month.
Yes.
And you'll bring the street cross sections to us the first time next month. We'll start the 30-day clock next month.
We actually started the 30-day clock last month.
Right.
That's how, yes,
You're deferring for
but
another
we're
month.
deferring,
Okay.
yes.
Thank you. All right, any other business? I hear a motion, we adjourn.
So moved. Second.
All in favor? Aye.